All right, Fran.
Great. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the March 13th, 2025 Connecticut Paid Leave Board of Directors meeting. I'm calling the meeting to order at 9:03 a.m. Amber, would you kindly take attendance? And
Yes,
confirm
thank
if
you.
we have a quorum. Thank you.
Yes, Ava Bermuda Zimmerman,
Present.
Isha Canada,
Present.
Adrian Cochran will not be joining us today. Andrea Comer,
Present.
Sheila Hummel,
Present.
Ellen McKitterick,
Present.
Fran Pastore,
Present.
David Salazar Austin will not be joining us today. John Scott,
I am here.
Mike Soltis,
Present.
Molly Weston Williamson,
Present.
Holly Williams,
Present.
Janae Woods Weber will not be joining us today. Justin Zartman.
Present.
Good morning and thank you, everyone. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Amber. And thanks to the members of the public who are joining us today. We are going to move on, and I'm going to ask for a review of the February 13th, 2025 meeting minutes. Are there any corrections or any discussions? Okay, may I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Tom.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions?
Mike.
Yes.
I am abstaining.
Abstention, Andrea Comer.
Abstention.
Abstain.
Ollie and Andrea are abstaining.
Thank
And
you.
and Fran.
And
Mike
Mike
is
is.
okay.
Fran and Mike.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Okay.
Just can
Okay.
I interrupt?
Mm.
Commissioner Gilman, I'm not sure if we called her, but she is here. So
I thought
everyone
we did.
just note that.
Yep, I'm
Thank
present.
you.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Okay, we're going to turn to Spring Group now to provide the actuarial quarterly report.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'll share my screen. See this?
We can see your screen, Harendra.
Great, thank you. So the purpose of my part of this presentation is to provide the quarterly update. So this represents the results from Q2 of the fiscal year. So effectively, it's for the period July 2024 through December 2024. Very briefly, what we're showing here, as we show every quarter, are the actual results for that time period. So the 6-month time period, July through December 2024, compared to what we had shown previously. The numbers on the right-hand side are the numbers that were previously presented to the board in December. So they reflect any updates that we had made up to that point, including review of the claims that were done at that point as well. These numbers are all on an incurred basis. So in other words, they represent claims that have occurred, but where cash payments may not have yet been paid. So it includes reserves for those outstanding payments as well, and reserves for contributions that have been earned up to that point but not yet received. So overall, when we look at the actual results, we started the period with a beginning fund balance net of outstanding contributions and claim payments of $628.7 million. Net activity for this 6-month period was negative $16.3 million. So the overall fund balance at the end of the 6 months is $612.4 million. This represents slightly better performance compared to our last projection, driven by higher investment income as the primary factor. We do have slightly higher contributions as well, and incurred claims are slightly lower than what was there in the prior projection. So overall, we had contributions earned of $215 million for this 6-month period, investment income of $14.8 million, which is the one that was more materially higher compared to the prior projection of $11.3 million. Incurred claims, $224.7 million, and other expenses of $21.4 million. So overall, that adds up to the 16.3 million. And that's what results in an ending fund balance of 612.4 million. Looking at the target funding metrics that we had established a while back, we continue to be below those metrics, and so the fund position, it remains strong based on these metrics. So that's a summary of the results. I'll briefly just point out, we do also show the same results in a graphical form in this page here, but it's the same results that were shown on the prior page. And we also have the details in this following page as well. The intent was not to go through this during this call. This last page provides the full year 12-month projection. So the previous, we were looking at year to date, July through December 2024. This shows the full fiscal year projection. So from July 2024 all the way to June 2025. And what we have provided here is an update, and the prior numbers that were presented are shown on the right-hand side, and the update is shown in this column in the middle. So we anticipate that overall, the net activity, based on the updated projections, will be this 14.1 million. So overall, the fund balance at the end of the period is projected to be at 642.8 million. So we have made a small update compared to what we had previously. And that's primarily increasing the investment income item to go to 26 million compared to 24.9, reflecting some of the good experience that we saw in this last quarter. And then we also have a more material update in the other expenses. So the other expenses is down by approximately 5 million, driven by the fact that there was no transfer to the trust fund during January that was previously expected to be 5 million. So that initial transfer, that the expected transfer was not needed, so it was not taken. So that lowers the expense number that's projected for the full year, and that's what results in the net activity being at the 14.1 million number compared to what we had previously of 8.2. That concludes my formal part of the presentation, and I'll open it up for questions.
Nobody has any questions for Harinder? Thank you, Harinder.
Thank you.
We're going to move on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Michael will lead us in the discussion regarding the proposed revisions to the employee handbook. Michael.
Thank you, Fran, and good morning, everybody. I'm going to share my screen for a second. I know we have a busy agenda. I'm going to do my best to avoid ranting too much. Wish me luck. Can everyone see the PowerPoint?
We can see your screen, Michael.
Thank you so much. Just to recap where we are right now with the handbook revisions. Back in December, we had recommended changes to our handbook. This is sort of a recap of the purpose behind those changes. The board had voted to post those revisions for notice and public comment. That comment period was basically mid to late December through mid to late January. We actually did not receive any public comments from the general public related to the policy, but we did have some comments and questions and discussions from internal authority folks, which makes sense given that this policy is inward facing and applies to the employment with the authority. Hopefully the entire board saw the two documents related to the employee handbook. One is a clean version, sort of what we would hope to have the board officially adopt as the final version of the handbook. The other one was a red line version with all the specific changes in it. And within that red line version, I also highlighted in blue language that was new since the notice and comment period based on those conversations that happened during that period with the internal folks. This is sort of summing it up. I'm happy to go into any detail about specific changes if the board wants, but it's sort of this highlights all of the items that led to those changes. On the right are the cosmetic. I'll skip that for now, but if anyone has any questions, please raise them. And I'll focus on the left because these are the substantive changes with the language. The first item actually wasn't based on a comment. This just happened to time the coincidence in the timing. The state of Connecticut released guidance as to how it, as an employer, would comply with the new paid sick leave law that went into effect on January 1st of this year. Essentially, it gives everyone 5 days of sick time to use for various purposes. The way that the state of Connecticut is going to comply, and therefore the way that we will comply, is to basically allow the use of 3 days of personal leave and then 2 days of sick family leave, which is sort of one of the reasons you can use your sick time. Use those 5 days to account for the paid sick leave. There's no change for the amount of accruals or sort of how you use the accruals. It's just a matter of how they get accounted for in core, our system for reporting your time. So not really a substantive change, but we did want to identify that as a change in the handbook. The second item, speaking of sick family time, we noticed we were misaligned with the rest of the state as far as how much of your sick time you could use specifically for sick family. Our handbook said 5 days, but a few years ago, I think it was 5 or 6 years ago, the rest of the state went to allow 10 days per year to be used for sick family. So that already applied to our CBA folks, people subject to collective bargaining agreements. This is just aligning that for the rest of us so that it's 10 days sort of across the board for sick family. The third item that we addressed after the notice of comment period was a small change to allow the CEO to waive a requirement that employees work during certain core hours. The original language said all employees are expected to have their 8-hour schedule, and those 8 hours should always include 9:30 in the morning to 3 p.m. In the afternoon, just so we have a certain period of time that sort of the authorities, everyone's working. The CEO can waive that on certain circumstances. That's primarily meant for the outreach team because they're often having events on weekends or at night, and there may be a reason why they shouldn't have to work the 9:30 to 3, or there might not be enough hours in the week for them to work those 9:30 to 3 based on that extra work they're doing. Fourth item relates to flex time. This is sort of the brief absences that an employee may have during the course of a day that they then make up within the same pay period. What we require is that that use of flex time is approved in advance by the supervisor, but we added language to say if the absence is less than 60 minutes, you don't necessarily need the prior approval so long as your supervisor is aware of the use of that flex time. In addition, we added language that if an employee regularly uses flex time or habitually uses it, it can lead to a conversation with their supervisor about potentially updating their regular work schedule, because the regular work schedule should reflect what they're actually expected to work. Second to last item is the usage of vacation time or comp time and how much notice is required. The current language in the existing handbook has a 2-tier system. If you're taking vacation time of less than a week, you need to give 2 days notice. If you're taking it for more than a week, you need to give 2 weeks notice. We basically adjusted that language to be a sort of a spectrum that notices based on the sliding scale based on how much of the absence, basically double the absence period, and you need to give that amount of notice. So for example, if you're going to be out for 1 day, you need to give notice to your supervisor at least 2 days before that absence starts. If you're going to be out for 4 hours, you need to give 8 hours notice. And then the last item in the substantive list is what I'm calling recurrent occasions or occurrences. We added language previously to have this concept of occasions, where if it's an unscheduled absence, you sort of get a mark against you. If you have a certain number of those against you in a short period of time, that can lead to a conversation with supervisor about why you're having significant absences. What we worried about in this case is someone who's sick on Monday, maybe they're not feeling great on Tuesday, but they try to come back to work on Tuesday, and then they just can't take it and they have to go out again on Wednesday. That in theory could count as 2 separate occasions, but it's really for the same event. And we don't want to discourage people from attempting to work if they think they're able to. So the rule is, and the recommended change is to have any absence for the same reason when you return to work for fewer than 2 business days, it would be basically treated as continuance of that first occurrence. So it would just be sort of 1 ding against you on the occurrence scale versus 2 separate ones. That's basically it for the substantive changes since the notice of comment period. I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have. I'm happy to go into more detail about any of the changes or talk about the cosmetic if the board would like. But otherwise, the hope is that the board votes to approve these revisions as recommended.
Are there any questions or comments for Michael on the revisions? Okay. It's good. May I have a motion to adopt the proposed revisions to the employee handbook?
Motion to approve.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, excellent. The motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Okay, Erin, would you kindly review the analysis of the TPA versus the in-house administration analysis?
And Aaron, if you're talking to me, I think you're on mute.
Thank you. Last month, we were asked to review the claim administration decision that in advance of the discussion about the TPA contract. So we updated it. Just as a reminder, in January of 2024, we went to you to ask you to choose between two options, essentially continuing with the TPA model and going with an RFP, or changing directions and building in-house. And in January, the majority of voting members of the board voted for option one. So that's what we've been moving forward with. But it's always good to keep an eye on kind of what we're doing and why we're doing it. This slide should be familiar to you. We've used it since 2019 with slight adjustments, but it really just summarizes the core values of the authority. We need to be nimble, able to respond quickly to changes. As we've seen, we've had a lot of fluctuations in claims and variability in covered participants. A federal paid leave solution doesn't look like it's happening anytime soon, but it's still on the horizon. We need to be fiscally prudent. We have a fiduciary duty with regard to the trust fund money, so we want to use that wisely, minimizing risk, making sure that we have minimized administrative costs, maximizing the money that's available for benefits, while simultaneously providing for stellar customer service. So we're not a low-cost solution, but we do need to be prudent and kind of a value proposition. And so keeping that in mind, we've always talked about the IT components to claims administration are pretty significant. There are the outward facing things like the call center and claims intake, as well as what we call our dashboard, where workers can upload their documents and track their claims. But there's also all of the sort of behind the scenes things that need to be done by the processing platform, pulling together the data necessary to make eligibility decisions, to track the claims, to calculate the benefits. That platform needs to be able to have pretty robust reporting and audit functions. It needs to have strong security and integrity protocols. It's a significant investment. And then once you invest in it, like all IT, you need to continue to invest money in for updates and modifications. So it's a big deal with a lot of risk and a lot of money. And so the board has now voted a couple of times that using a third-party administrator makes sense, in part, a large part, because they already have that significant infrastructure. It does enable us to be more nimble to respond to changes and allows us to focus on managing that relationship. And we are providing great customer service we've got 24 metrics that we hold the TPA accountable for, and they're meeting those metrics with fast turnaround times, fast answering the phones, high quality work. As we did last year, and as I will share with you today, it is still more cost effective than building in-house. When we look at cost effectiveness, we look at the various elements of building in-house. The primary cost is the staffing. So there are almost 170 people at Aflac who are currently dedicated to the Connecticut Paid Leave Program. And there are additional staff on top of that who are available to the Connecticut Paid Leave Program. So we knew that if we were building in-house, we'd have to replicate that. So we identified similar job titles in state service and identify what that salary would look like. But that's not all. If we're going to add 200 plus people to our payroll, there's a lot more overhead. So we would no longer be able to rely on the DIS Smart Team. We would need our own in-house HR, EEO, payroll. We need expanded fiscal. We would need a space to put everybody. Fully remote works for what we do, but not for a claim center. So you need both a facility, you need facility staff, you need furniture, computers, security. In addition to all of the IT that I've already discussed, you need sort of just your run-of-the-mill IT, Office 365 licenses and things like that. And then there's just also the other miscellaneous costs. There's print and mail. We send out 1099s every year. Our insurance is based on our operating budget. So, and if we had a facility, we'd need insurance for that. So there's just a lot of costs that go into that. We are still in an environment where we need to maintain our competitive advantage. So I'm not going to get into all of the specific numbers, but I will say that we took the analysis that we did last year and updated them in a couple of ways. Last year, we did a 3-year look using sort of year one based on 2023 state salary levels. We updated year one to be 2024 state salary levels and also expanded it out to 5 years because that's consistent with the what we put the RFP out for. We also updated other expenses costs to reflect inflation and just general price increases that we've seen. Like last year, we had a range of costs. We had the low end, which is sort of a 1-for-1. And then we also, Spring had given us the advice that they thought we would need more people and sort of more, we needed to account for future salary increases, but also potentially future increases in staff, which would increase sort of OE as well. So we did that again with the low end and the high end. Like last year, utilizing a TPA is significantly less expensive and has all of the other values I described compared to in-house. In-house was 60 to 100% more expensive. When I updated the numbers this year with help from fiscal, it's actually 70 to 115% more expensive to build in-house. And that's really taking every assumption in favor of building in-house. So it's just, there's just a lot of things that we would have to carry that we are not carrying right now. I do want to just take a moment to talk about how we report our costs compared to other programs, because there are some significant differences that I think often get shadowed. First, there are structural differences. We have an integrated medical leave and family leave benefit system. They're all within our one program. In other states, particularly the legacy states, these are separate programs, and they may be reported separately because they're separate divisions. So when you're comparing states to states, it's really important to make sure you're looking at total costs of both the temporary disability programs and the family leave programs. In many states, contributions are managed internally, as they are for us, but there are states where it is not managed internally. So either another agency is managing it, or it's a different cost center within the same agency. And so those contribution costs, the cost of getting the money in, processing it, doing the fund recovery, may not be showing up. A less significant but still existing difference is the private plans. Some states don't allow for private plans, so they just don't have that cost. Some states charge for private plan applications. It doesn't cover the costs of administering private plans, but they get a little money in. We don't do that. And to our knowledge, we're the only state that does private plan audits. So again, that's just more work that we do that adds to overhead. And finally, the structure of our benefits adds to the claim administration obligations and cost. Some states have an elimination period, so you don't get benefits for that first week that you're out. Some states don't allow for intermittent leaves. In some states, I didn't add this, but some states don't allow for early filing. All of the things that we do, the no elimination period, the intermittent leave, and the early filing, benefit workers. It makes it easier for them to get the claims, to get the benefits that they need in the way that they need it. But it also means that it's more work. It's just something to be aware of. More work equals more cost. And then there are some costs that we report that may not be reported by other programs because they live in other cost centers. So they exist, but they may not be reported. Again, some do, some don't. But the pension and benefit load, we report our IT costs, which includes not just our staff, but sort of the software, hardware, and subscriptions, HR and payroll support, outreach. Some states will report on paid leave specific outreach, but they don't have to report on the cost of their staff. Some have it all be out in a different cost center. Similarly for legal, the legal might be in a different cost center. Because we're a quasi, we don't get represented by the Attorney General's office, so we have outside counsel, and we have bond fund repayments. So it's important to be aware of these costs just when you're comparing programs to programs. But even with all of that, if we were to bring claim administration in-house, it would significantly add to our overhead. Again, not necessarily doubling our costs, but getting pretty darn close, which is why we asked you last year to vote to allow us to move forward with the TPA. And in a moment, we will be discussing the outcome of that. But before I do that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Erin, thank you. That was extremely thorough and detail-oriented and really helped me understand even without the numbers. So I really appreciate that. Does anybody else have any question or feedback? Molly? I'm sorry, I can't see your hand up. It's being blocked by something else, but go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the recording button makes it hard
Yes.
to see.
Yeah, exactly.
So first, I just want to say thank you. Because I was the one who asked for this, and I appreciate all of the care that was put into this presentation and all of the context, including, I think, the context about factors that make costs seem more or less comparable is really, compared to other states, is really helpful. It also sounds like, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that some parts of this have to do with the sort of accounting impacts of the quasi structure in terms of which things are sort of getting assessed to the authority or not, which is helpful context as we continue to think about and evaluate what's happening as we look forward to looking to see the results of the request for proposal. I did have one question, just in terms of thinking about, I'm sure that the overall basic comparison stays the same, but when we're talking about this, potential close to doubling of costs, when we're comparing the assessment, which sounds like I'm glad to hear that Spring was helpful in revising that, of what in-house capacity would look like. What are we comparing that to? Are we comparing that to the current Aflac contract? Are we comparing that to an expected future? Like what's
Yeah.
the number we're using for
Great question. So we used the sort of base analysis from last year. So we used the staff that are currently working for us. So that's the current Aflac contract for my words for staffing. But when we're comparing the cost of a TPA, I utilized information that we gathered through this year's RFP process. So that was updated as well. Again, just trying to make sure that we're taking every inference in favor of internal, just because I think that's due to the question. And then just one thing, the one thing that is different with us being a quasi is that we don't get the AG support. But there are other states where their program is in a traditional agency, but the cost centers may be different. And so that's really what I was focusing on. So it's not that we're quasi, it's just that we report on all those things, whereas you may have another state where outreach lives in your communications department and not in your paid leave department, and therefore it doesn't show up as a cost.
Thank you for clarifying both on the points of difference among states and on the sourcing for the private costs. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions for Erin? Okay, I don't see any hands raised, so if there are any hands raised, please say so. Okay, thanks, everyone. Molly, thank you for your question. Erin, thanks for the presentation. Okay, so for the board members, I'm going to ask for a motion in a moment to enter into an executive session. So the reason for the executive session is to enable the authority staff to brief the board on the responses to the RFP for claims administration. The reason the executive session is necessary in this case is because the public interest in the disclosure of such responses is outweighed by the public interest in such confidentiality of such responses. So some instructions before we ask for a motion. We need an affirmative vote of 2/3 of the voting members present at this meeting to go into the executive session. When we do enter the executive session, you will need to leave your Zoom meeting and you'll use the Microsoft Teams meeting to enter the executive session. Stephanie sent that along with the agenda yesterday. Our Zoom link will remain open, but not open on your desktop. In other words, we'll be able to go use that same Zoom link to go back to the board meeting. No voting will occur during the executive session. And when it's over, you need to close out of your Zoom link and return to the close out of the Teams link and go back to the Zoom link. And then when all board members have returned from the executive session, we will resume our regular board meeting. Okay, so now may I ask the board for a motion to enter the executive session for the purposes of discussing the responses to the RFP for claims administration. And I'd like to also formally invite members of the authority staff. Joe Calais, I hope I said that right, Michael Cesar, Erin Choquette, Laura Dixon, John Simonelli, Priscilla Torcello, and I'd like you to join the board in the executive session. May I have a motion?
Motion.
Michelle?
May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I believe the motion Any abstentions?
We need any opposed.
Any opposed? Sorry. Thank you. Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. The time is 9:35. We will now go into executive session. Thank you.
Are you able to get that screen up, Steph?
Just trying to share it. Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Can you see it now?
No, we cannot, but that's okay. I've got it up here. Can you please keep an eye on the waiting room for when our board members return?
Yes.
Okay,
Everyone's
Yeah.
back.
excellent. Thank you, Amber. All right, the time is 10:10 and the Board of Directors meeting is back in session. Okay, our next item is to vote to authorize the authority staff to negotiate and execute a contract with the proposed vendor. May I have a motion to authorize the authority staff to negotiate and execute the contract with the authority's proposed vendor? All in favor?
I'm sorry, we need a second.
I'm sorry.
Second.
Sorry, guys, my dogs are going crazy here. I'm sorry. Distracted me. Okay, we have a second. Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
We need
You
a,
have
we
to
need
all
an
in
all
favor first. You have to,
All in favor? I'm sorry. All in favor?
aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, excellent. The motion carries. Thank you, everyone. We'll move on to the committee reports. I believe Holly is going to share a committee report on the Policy and Personnel Committee.
Yes, thank you. So the committee met last week and received an update on the revisions to the employee handbook, which you heard today, along with an update on staffing. The committee also discussed the process of setting and reviewing salary levels, and that was it.
Thank you, Holly. Molly, Outreach and Engagement Report?
We did not meet last month, but we'll meet next week.
Okay. And back to Holly, Finance and Audit.
So the committee met last month and received the actuarial quarterly report, as well as the presentation of the regular financial reports that you're going to hear today from Dave. So I turn it over to Dave.
Thank you, Holly, and good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Dave.
Good morning, Fran.
We can see your screen, Dave.
Thank you for the confirmation. Okay, we are going over the results for the month and year to date through January of 2020 through 2025. For the month of January, our net results were a negative $984,000. That is a over a negative 4.5 negative variance to budget. But that is because, as Harindra had indicated before, we did not transfer the $5 million from the contribution account to operations because we didn't need to, because we have enough in our operating reserves to carry us through the quarter. So we kept the money in the contribution account where it could earn more interest. So that was why we did that. In terms of expenses, we had over $1,026,000. That was a $414,000 positive variance. Typical expenses for the month, nothing out of the ordinary. Year to date, our activity has been $2.6 million. That's a negative 1.8 over a negative $1.8 million variance. It's negative again because we didn't transfer the $5 million. Our expenses year to date have been just under $7.8 million, and we're just under a $3 million positive variance for the year. And it's because of that positive variance, that's why we didn't transfer the $5 million over. For bond act, I don't know where the bond activity,
No, it's there. We see it.
No, I know. I was looking for another schedule, but anyway, I'll just talk it through. Our bond activity for the month was a negative $110,000. That was a $10,000 variance for the month. Year to date, our bond spending has been $721,000. That's primarily been on fund recovery efforts, and year to date, it's been a negative $21,000. By the end of the year, we think we'll be where we expect to be in terms of bond spending, which is about $1.2 million. As you can see on the screen, we have over $1,665,000 of bond money remaining, and we'll be continuing to use that through the end of the fiscal year. As far as contribution activity, we have just under $65 million of bond activity for the month of January, for a positive variance of $6.3 million. The biggest driver of that, again, was we didn't transfer the $5 million over for the paid leave administrative fee. But even if we had, we still would have had a positive variance of over $1.3 million. And that's because our contributions that came in this month, which represented the most recent quarter, was over $104.4 million, and we had over a $4 million positive variance. Other significant activity for the month were benefit payments, of course, of over $39.8 million. That averages out to $8 million a week. That's been lower than it has been in the past, and that's because of seasonality that we see. There's typically a dip in December and January, then it starts picking up in late January into February. And so we did continue to see that again, and that's why the average weekly rate was lower than it has been. Just for comparative purposes, in December, for example, the average weekly reimbursement rate was $8.5 million a week, so it dropped down to $8 million a week in January. Year to date, our activity is over $66 million. That does result in a negative variance of over $19.5 million. Again, the biggest driver of that is benefit payments. It's a negative $37.2 million. And as you're probably familiar with by now, that's because the actual payments that we're making were more than we had budgeted about 11 months ago. We have adjusted for that in our forecast that we'll get to in a few minutes. Just to give everybody a brief overview of how our contribution activity has been doing, because it was our most recent quarter that ended in January. As you may remember, the quarter does end December 31st, but there's an additional 1-month period that employers can pay without penalty. And so most of the employers do pay during the month of January. So for the most recent quarter, our contributions coming in, that is the yellow column all the way on the right-hand side, of $106.6 million. Compared to the same quarter last year, that is 6.6% more in contributions that we got last year, or $6.6 million. Same quarter last year was $100 million even, so that makes the math pretty easy. Year to date, our contributions that came in were $472.7 million. That's $22.7 million, or 5% higher than the prior year. So quarter over quarter and year over year, we are consistently seeing contributions come in to the authority of a higher amount than the prior year. And that's primarily due to our continued enforcement efforts with employers and wages increasing. What does that all mean for the contribution fund, as I like to say? The contribution fund is at $632.2 million. As Harindra indicated before, it's solvent, and so that reserve is in a good place for any future items that may happen along the way, in case contributions go down or benefits go up at a higher rate than they are now. We have enough of a reserve to continue paying benefits as intended. Quick preview for February, we had operating expenses of just over $1 million. Again, nothing out of the ordinary. Benefit payments for the month of February were $33.8 million. The average weekly rate did ramp up in February, as I indicated earlier, ramped back up to $8.5 million. So at the same rate it was a couple of months before that. Contributions that came in were relatively small compared to the prior month at $1.2 million. And that's because, like I say, people wait till the last month to pay, and our investment income was just under $2.1 million. Expectations for the end of the year. In terms of our operating account, we expect to be at a net activity of $1.2 million. That is a negative $700,000 variance. Again, that's because we didn't transfer the $5 million in revenue over. But a lot of that is offset by savings in various expenses. The trends that I've mentioned in past meetings have not changed significantly. So that's why we expect to have over a $4 million positive variance in expenses by the end of the year. For our contribution activity, we expect to be at just under $14.6 million by the end of the year. That is just over $48.5 million, less than budget. But again, that's because benefit payments are higher than what we budgeted about 11 months ago. But we'll still be positive by the end of the year. And as Harindra indicated, on an incurred basis, our fund would be over $642 million. On a cash basis, which is what we report at, we'll be at over $580 million. And if you're wondering why that's lower than what Harindra had reported before, the biggest difference in incurred versus cash is that our year end is the month of June. The contributions for that quarter, most of them come in July. So on a cash basis, they come in the next fiscal year, but they're earned or incurred for the quarter ended June. So that's why there's that difference. But either way, by the end of July, we will get those contributions and the fund will continue to be in a solvent state. So that's where we are for January and February and where we project to be at the end of the year. I'm happy to take any questions at this time.
Dave, thank you. Any questions for Dave? Okay. Thank you so much. We're going to move on to Erin and your CEO report.
Thank you so much, Van. First, I'd like to thank the board for the authority to move ahead with our RFP. I just want to point out, this was a very successful process. We had several entities that responded to our RFP proposal. They were qualified, they were diligent. It was a very difficult choice. And so I think that's good for the overall health of the program that we had so many respondents and so many good choices. I also want to thank the RFP team for all of their work over the past many, many months in putting together the proposal documents, reviewing the proposals, and analyzing our options. So thank you very much for that. I have some sad news to share. Our wonderful Lori Dixon, who has been with us since almost the beginning, she is our employee with the longest official tenure at the authority, is choosing to end her career with us. She is retiring in April. We are all still in denial about it, but I want to take this moment to thank her publicly. She has chosen to remain behind the scenes, but don't allow that to fool you. She has been critical to the growth and success of the authority. And I personally don't know what I'm going to do without her, but I really wish her all the best. We have been very fortunate to have Lori with us for these past 5 years and have her imprint on the DNA of our program. So I just want to take this moment to thank her.
And thank you, Erin. I appreciate those kind words and this opportunity. It's been a lot of fun.
I'm really proud of everything that we've done. It's been great, but it's time.
Mm. Thank you, Laura, for your service
Sure.
and being such an integral member of the team. And good luck and congratulations to you. And I look forward to see what you're going to do next.
Thank you.
All right, that's it for me.
Thank you, Erin. Anybody have any questions? All right, we're going to move on to any old business. Any new business? All right, this was a good meeting. We accomplished a lot. Thank you, everyone. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. We are adjourned at 10:26 a.m. Thank you, Erin and the team, and all the board members for a really good and productive meeting. Have a wonderful rest of the week and a great weekend.
Take good care, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.